I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
David, I have a stack order for you.
Whoopee!
If you fancy it, it continues our regular merchandise range theme, and it's sparked by the news that the drinks company Liquid Death have released their latest collaboration with Ozzy Osbourne. You may know about it. It's a limited run of empty iced tea cans that he drank from and crushed, and thus are special because they contain traces of Osbourne's actual DNA, it says here. For the low price of £450 for $450 each. In fact, they've sold out. In case you wanted to get one. Okay. Regular theme. 5 items of band merchandise, one of them made up by me. Mm-hmm. Spot the ringer. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm. Pet Shop Boys Salt and Pepper set by the celebrated industrial designer and indeed friend of the band, Tom Dixon, who I think was in Funkapolitan. The pepper grinder is in brushed chrome steel, and these elegant table ornaments are £88 a set. Neil is salt, Chris is pepper, and you can get a flavour of the pet's different characters. Okay, that's one. Yep. Metallica's Monopoly set, a custom version of the classic board game. Pieces include Lady Justice, a death magnetic coffin, a Ride the Lightning electric chair, and a Master of the Puppets cross and the Scary Guy, £34.99. Yep. Okay. Third one, there are 5. Elbow Ale, the Manchester band, offer a limited edition premium bitter called Build a Rocket Boys, named after one of their albums. Mm-hmm. It's a 4% proof session ale, partnered with local brewers Robinson of Stockport. Number 4, Nick Cave unisex clogs. Yep. The Nick Cave 5 classic clogs are a standout selection in our clogs collection, ideal for those who enjoy the comfort and versatility of unisex footwear. Offered in black, these elegant clogs come in 36 sizes, providing a functional option for £31.90. Right, and the last one is the Weezer fake moustache set. Everyone's favourite geek rockers are selling a realistic fake moustache set for $10 a pop. The stick-on lip scruff is made by humans for humans and will help you blend right in. There you are, Dave. One of those is a ringer. Which is it?
I'll tell you which one it is. It's the Metallica Monopoly set. Am I right? Am I wrong?
No. Why did you think that?
I'll tell you what, because you priced it too low. You said it 38 quid. Well, is that true? Is it real?
That's what it came up as, $34.99. Maybe I got an eBay version or something, but it does seem quite reasonable, doesn't it?
Okay, so that one's as real. Okay, so Pet Shop Boys stuff is obviously real. Elbow Ale has got to be real. Nick Cave.
That was actually, it was a few years ago, yeah.
Nick Cave does everything. You can buy Nick Cave merchandise for anything, so clogs does not surprise me. So I can only assume that the Weezer false moustache then is the...
oh, right, okay. No, I'm afraid I've fished you in. It's the Pet Shop Boys.
Oh, God. Well.
Pet Shop Boys do not have a salt and pepper set. As I was writing that, I was thinking, actually, does anybody have a salt and pepper set anymore? Because nobody uses salt and pepper.
That's true. That's true.
Do they? You used to lay the table, you'd put salt and pepper out. You don't do that anymore.
No, true.
But I sort of think that they might have in kind of brushed chrome steel designed by Tom Dixon. Anyway, well, I win. You've got one for me, right?
I've got one for you, which is inspired by. We went out for lunch in the country yesterday. Down at your stamping ground, we're down in Hampshire.
Oh yeah,
with a load of French people in a field, drinking rosé and talking about the British, habit of celebrity rosés. Every celebrity has a rosé nowadays. And so you have to tell me, I've got in front of me 6 pop stars who have brands of rosé under their name. One of them is a ringer, okay? And you've got to tell me which one.
Oh, this is good. This is very good, yeah.
Kylie Minogue, Lady Gaga,
Right.
Gary Barlow, John Bon Jovi, Post Malone, and Snoop Dogg. Okay? One of those 6 does not currently, as we stand, have a rosé on the market.
So
The other
Kylie Minogue,
5
Lady
all
Gaga,
do. Gary
Kylie
Barlow,
Minogue, Lady Gaga,
Gary Barlow, John Bon Jovi, Post Malone, and Snoop Dogg. Who is the one who doesn't have a
Snoop Dogg's so unlikely that he must have one, because that's going against the grain, isn't it? Kylie, I can see a Kylie blush, can't you? So that's got to be the case. As is Lady Gaga, very rosé concept. Post Malone must have one, or they wouldn't be in there for some reason. Because I don't think he would have chosen them naturally. That leaves John Bon Jovi and Gary Barlow. Gary Barlow, I suppose it's John Bon. Yeah, but then John Bon does have restaurants and things, doesn't he, or what?
So you're completely wrong.
Gary Barlow.
The person who doesn't have a rosé is Lady Gaga. Kylie Minogue, we have Kylie Minogue, who's in the wine business in a big way, actually. Kylie Minogue, Côte de Provence rosé. Hampton Water rosé was developed by John Bon Jovi and his son, Jesse Bon Jovi. Post Malone, Maison Number 9, born from an idea to bring together a best-in-class winery. Post Malone's love of the Mediterranean lifestyle and rosé. Snoop Dogg, of course, Cali by Snoop is a brand of wine. Cali Rosé is one of the rosés within that brand. Bright summery rosé, fresh red berry flavors, delicate florals, and a touch of sweetness. Gary Barlow has released an organic rosé wine made from 100% Tempranillo grapes grown in Castile region of Spain. So they're all absolutely into it, And I was just reading a piece about a wine company called Benchmark, I think. And apparently there are so many celebrities nowadays keen to have their names attached to wine that they're pretty much having to beat them off with a stick. They have somebody whose job in the office is just to tell disappointed pop stars that no, frankly, you can't.
You don't want their vineyard.
Well, they don't have a vineyard at all. They just have the name on a label. I was thinking about this because I was just reading about Sam Fender, the Geordie rock star, who has now applied for permission to attach his brand to all kinds of drinks, including alcoholic drinks. So it's now hugely a part of the plan. It's probably if you're looking at Gary Barlow's annual royalties statement, your record's probably nothing compared to what he must make.
No, that's right.
Out of rosé or t-shirts
records,
or whatever.
Tour profits,
and
rosé.
You look at what I don't know. Various generally female pop stars are made out of attaching their names to fragrances, and it's far more than they would ever make out of putting their name on a record. So so there you go. I need
to go out there and see if I can find a bottle of Snoop Dogg rosé. That sounds perfect.
I doubt if it's got to Chiswick, Mark.
This is Word in Your Ear, down the rock and roll rabbit hole since 2007.
So, Dave, you're following the story, I'm sure, of No Visa, No Work. There was a piece about it I think it was in the Telegraph that we were reading. And the idea that musicians are now really cautious about the idea of saying anything controversial or anti, really, about the United States president, because there have been various incidences of groups getting a hard time and finding it's difficult to get visas or difficult to get into the country or whatever, which have been related to, particularly the UK subs thing we talked about before, which have been related to things that they might or might not have said in the past. And there's a big controversy about Kneecap, Kneecap's court case coming up, etc. very controversially playing the Glastonbury next weekend, which is interesting, actually. At a slight tangent, when was the last time you can remember a prime minister of saying something, of criticising a pop group? I can remember.
Really? Is it? I missed this.
Yeah. Politicians regularly say how much they love pop groups.
Yes,
as
absolutely.
A kind of vote-winning
I particularly love the edgy ones. I rather like that. Me and my 70-year-old son, we go to the edgy ones together. That's right.
I know, absolutely ludicrous.
It's not like that.
No, Keir Starmer has said he disapproves of the idea of Kneecap playing Glastonbury. This is because this relates obviously to the court case about them allegedly displaying a flag in support of Hezbollah at a concert in London last year. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting he'd mentioned that. But then Kneecap, a really good example. Kneecap have a US tour booked, big part of any group's revenue plan, and are now concerned that they might not get visas, they might get a hard time getting in there. I think it's quite interesting, really. I mean, it's interesting about Springsteen in a way. His last concert I noticed is on July the 3rd and in Milan. And so on Independence Day, in fact, July the 4th, may be the day that he's trying to return to America. And who knows? It might, after the various controversial things he said, there might be a less than warm welcome. I think it would be fantastically unwise of the president to do anything that impeded him. But still, so I thought it was just an interesting story because
if I were
now people are very cautious, aren't they, about saying anything negative for fear that it might have repercussions about being able to tour America.
If I were the manager or agent of Kneecap, the one thing that would keep me awake at night is the prospect of being granted a visa into the United States, because the whole deal with Kneecap works on the basis that we're the group everybody's trying to ban. Whereas if they let you in, you're scuppered, really. And it's always been the problem. It was always the problem with the Sex Pistols going to the United States, is that the whole Sex Pistols pose was, we don't really want to do any of this. We hate all this. It's a bit of an obligation.
We don't like America.
We don't like America.
And then when we go there, which we don't want to do, we then decide to go off and play obscure places rather than the West and East Coasts as a kind of statement. The result is absolutely nothing. Nobody really there, bad reaction, just hopeless, a waste of time.
So, it's a difficult one, but undoubtedly is the case that people are increasingly aware of the expense of work visas and so forth, and the fact that they can be delayed or denied for a variety of reasons. And it's always been a huge part of the kind of revenue plan of all British groups, that if you can make it in any way in America, well, that's kind of 70% of your income taken care of there at a stroke,
Now you're going to have to concentrate on rosé.
Yes, absolutely. Getting the citizens of Europe
much safer market,
more drunk. Yeah. I don't really know how this is all going to turn out, and whether even somebody with the kind of attention span of Donald Trump can continue to kind of get up in the morning and think, what am I going to do today? Oh, I know, I'm going to have a go at Kneecap or Bruce Springsteen or whatever.
Yeah.
I think he may have bigger fish to fry, in the current dispensation. I don't know. It's interesting because the big entertainment combines, the big publishing companies, the big record companies, not that there are all that many of those anymore. It's just a few. They're acutely aware, more aware than ever before, of the fact that, if they have some monopolies issue or something like that, or some antitrust action in the United States, that the wrong word from the White House can cost them billions, Had a stroke. So it's not to do with individual acts at all. It's to do with, how much of the market am I allowed? Can I have these licenses? Can run these radio stations? You got the big tech companies involved, and all the potential legislation that they might run into. So the companies themselves are tending to say, let's just keep quiet on all this stuff. Because actually the piece in the Telegraph that you referred to, who doesn't identify the well-known British pop star who in an interview said something vaguely disparaging about the president. And then he got a call back from the publicist saying, probably better it's not in the article. Well, we've all had those kind of calls, haven't we? We tended to totally ignore them, because anything that anybody doesn't want in an article usually should be in the article for loads of reasons. But, people are showing their nervousness more now than ever before.
But in the broader scheme of things, if you were in a group now, traditionally your means of revenue would be selling the music and touring. And, the two fortunes of both those things have changed quite a lot in the last 30 years. But now it's incredibly hard to make any money selling any music. And so their touring was the big option. If you think touring in America might be problematic, and in the light of the news that happened 2 or 3 hours ago, this morning, we're recording this on Sunday morning, as regards developments in Iran, you'll be worrying about the safety of going there, and it also post-Brexit, the complications of touring Europe are really hard.
Absolutely.
So the one place that you can tour is the UK, which is very hard to make a lot of money from.
Oh my God,
it's
nearly
a difficult
impossible.
predicament.
Nearly impossible unless you're really big, I would have thought. It's very difficult. So talking of the music industry, but the music industry way back, did you see the story that Carol Kaye, I think she's 90 years old now, actually.
She is.
The great, she played bass on, as a member of the group of musicians who became known as the Wrecking Crew in the 60s and 70s, so I don't know, these boots are made for walking, Pet Sounds, all kinds of things. She'll be one of the people who play bass, and they're obviously keen to honor her at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, veteran female musician, in her 90th year. She's refused to have any part of it. And I think her reasons are quite interesting, actually, because I think they throw an interesting light on the differing attitudes to making music. And she says, I was just one of 350 to 400 musicians. I think she identifies the local of the Musicians Union, that was based in Los Angeles in that time, and everybody got the call, and you would go and you'd do a commercial, and you do the Flintstones theme, and you do Frank Sinatra, you do Glenn Campbell, you do Phil Spector, you do absolutely everything. Anything you were required to do, you did. And, and she says, well, the idea of kind of identifying people individually is just not relevant to the way we worked, which I think is quite interesting, actually, because
That's a really good point.
She looked at it in a very kind of, forgive me, industrial way. And it's a way that's kind of alien to the way we look at these things nowadays. We think everything is about kind of, unique geniuses, individuals.
It's about individual talent.
It's about individual talent that managed to do something that nobody else could do. Whereas her point is, well, if I hadn't turned up to play the bass on These Boots for Made for Walking, somebody else would have done. And it would have probably been every bit as good. And
you may never have been able to tell the difference.
It reminded me, there's a very interesting book about the film industry. Can't remember the name of the author. And it's about the golden age of Hollywood, the 40s and the 50s. And it's about studios. And it's about the fact that, the studios did everything. They they paid the writers, they had the actors under contract, they had directors under contract, they had costumes, they had makeup, they had design, they had soundtracks. Everything they needed was within the industry. And the name of the book, and then the reason, because this applies to the point that Carol Kaye's made, the name of the book is The Genius of the System. And it's basically the system is what made those films. It's not individual writers. It's the system did that. This was a brilliantly honed machine that knew how to produce films. Occasionally, they would be brilliant. Sometimes they would be middling. They would rarely be less than middling because of the system.
Because the system.
The system was there
Hence
to make
the fact that most Oscar speeches tend to go on far too long because they're mentioning a huge number of people who this person feels ought to be mentioned in the light of them getting
except films are very different nowadays. They wouldn't have done that probably back in the days of, Gone with the Wind or whatever in the 40s because they were just taking it for granted that Selznick Pictures did, and that involved everybody who worked to Selznick Pictures, whereas...
And the public were only interested in the star.
Yeah. Whereas...
But it is fair enough. I think her point about the Wrecking Crew is absolutely fair enough. Because normally if somebody's getting on the King's Honours list, it's because they did something that was different. They had some involvement in a charity or something like that, in Roger Daltrey, whatever it's been, 36 years of the Teenage Cancer Trust, that's different from other members of the group, and therefore they deserve it. And, she was saying, that any member of the Wrecking Crew was equally deserving. Yeah. Although interesting, actually, Hal Blaine was inducted, wasn't he, into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah, well, I think
2000, and so was Earl Palmer, both from drummers, actually.
Yeah, well, most people don't turn it down if they're offered, do they?
No.
Whereas she's saying it was a day at work. It was just another day at work, and it is interesting because it's a kind of reaction to this, to the kind of the degree of reverence that is accorded anything in the past nowadays.
Yeah,
just grows all the time. Everybody knows Carol Kaye's name now. Well, back in the 60s, when she was making records, nobody knew her name at all.
And also, they might know her name more because from refusing to be inducted into the Hall of Fame than actually doing it. I mean, it's possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
She might get more recognition out of it.
Yeah. Well,
I always thought it was really good that Jennifer Saunders and they turned down various offers of things, didn't they? Dawn French turned down some I can't remember what it was, an MB or something. So it didn't feel right after her own father had received a CBE for his work in the Royal Air Force. She just sort of said, well, look, I just get paid a lot of money for just having fun, and I just don't think it's fair to be in the same category as somebody who really did something good.
No, that's fair. Fair point.
I thought it was fair enough, actually. Danny Boyle turned down this thing for the Olympics, didn't he? Saying it was a group effort. Fair enough. That'd be good.
You could drop in the National Gallery at 8 o'clock in the morning, with the cleaners going round and go and have a look at a couple of paintings and then go off to work or whatever. That'd be
fantastic.
That's what I call an honour, actually.
Jeez, that really is.
But I suppose they can't extend it to too many people, or there would be a queue outside the National Gallery at 7:30 in the morning. And I would be at the front
made up of
it.
very interesting people.
You're listening to Word in Your Ear. Cheaper than therapy, and you can walk the dog at the same time.
Normally nowadays, when I read stories about somebody's launching a record label, I always think, oh, good luck with that, mate, in this day and age. But I read about one the other day, which I have to say I thought was a really good idea. And it's an American reissue label. I think it's called High Moon. And their specialism is it's kind of undiscovered or underrated or previously obscure female performers. And as soon as I read this, I thought, that's a good idea. Because it's only what Virago did in the book publishing market, however long ago, probably the 70s, I suppose, which is throw light on previously forgotten or underexposed female authors. And then subsequently, there's a very good, I don't know if you've ever there's a wonderful little imprint called Persephone. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have.
And all their books look the same. She's makes them partly collectible. And they will do things like, this woman was really popular in the 30s and everybody's forgotten about her now. So here she is. Here's all her old books. And there's a real market for these kind of things. And I thought, my God, you could do that with female, singer-songwriters, I would have thought, particularly, because there were so many that, that kind of came through in the 60s and 70s and had a few records out, but just never achieved escape velocity, as you might put it, you know what I mean? Because they just weren't that many. Go on.
No, I listened to 3 of the ones that they're promoting, who I didn't know. Actually, people listening may know them. I didn't know them. I didn't know. Did you know Lottie Golden? Maybe you did.
No, I didn't.
Lottie Golden, who made a record in 1969 called Motorcycle. And I thought it was really, really interesting. And, she'd grown up listening to Billie Holiday and John Coltrane. And I listened to it as a kind of eccentric funk soul blues. There was a woman called Laurie Styvers.
Yes.
Who had 2 records. Again, I'd never heard of her. She's from Texas, and she grew up working in England and joined a psychedelic folk band called Justine. And Robert Christgau wrote a scathing review of her at the time, saying she was an LA airhead. Actually, she was from Texas and lived in England. And I listened to a record of hers called 5 Leaves Left. Very, very Nick Drake.
Yes, just a bit.
Which was, lovely freewheeling song about London life and going to Hampstead Heath. And Jeannie Piersol, who's now 85. I love this too. She's now 85, living in Sonoma County. Suddenly it's like Sugar Man, being discovered. She suddenly got a call saying, by the way, we'd like to put your record out, the one you made 50 years ago. That must be great, mustn't it?
Well, I was thinking if I did the same thing, a record of previously unknown female performers at Reissue's program. I was looking up, there's a woman called, I'm probably not pronouncing this right, but she's called Genya Ravan. But you probably know her better if you think back to the year, I think 1964. You may recall a record by Goldie and the Gingerbreads. Can you hear that, the beating of a heartbeat or whatever? That was her. She was born, I think, probably in Poland. So she in the late 30s or something, and then came to the United States in the 60s and was the leader of Goldie and the Gingerbreads, who kind of, I don't know, probably toured with the Beatles or something. And then a few years later, in the late 60s, early 70s, made some very kind of out there, kind of feminist, very thrusting records, which I've got a couple of. And I was looking at one the other day. It's got some of those wonderfully provocative song titles you've ever read. One of them is, you might want to turn your head away, Mark, and blush here. This one's called, I know how easily you blush. This song is called, I Won't Sleep on the Wet Spot No More. Which that's good. Oh, that's gritty. And that's 50 years ago. Do any better than that. But there was also, I was thinking, I'd say her records could be reissued. There's also somebody who's still around and, it must be in her 80s, and still playing, Bridget St. John. Who made 2 albums on John Peel's Dandelion label, 1969, 1970, which are wonderful records. The best records that came out on Dandelion, actually, are those. And the other one, because it's such a sad story, which I'm now going to recount, is Phoebe Snow. Do you know Phoebe Snow?
Oh, yeah, Phoebe Snow.
Phoebe Snow is featured on, most people probably know her because she duetted with Paul Simon on Gone at Last. Is that on Still Crazy after all these years? I think it is. Because he kind of sort of discovered her and worked with her. And she had a couple of records come out. Well, a few records come out. Poetry Man was kind of a hit. And then she got married to a man who then came out as gay. She had a child. The child was very badly, some very bad disability. And so she pretty much had to give up her work, to look after completely, became a full-time carer. Yeah. Pretty much for this child who died, I think, at the age of 31. At which point, Phoebe Snow went back to singing, and then died herself a couple of years later.
Oh, that's
that's the saddest story of it.
Oh, that's terrible.
But those Phoebe Snow records, Poetry Man, and looks like snow or whatever, they're really good records. So yeah. I'm sure there are loads of the point about this.
There must be loads. I'd not heard those three that they were playing. I mean, the lesser known women that I particularly like are actually getting real reputation now. Judy Sill.
Well, absolutely, yeah. A certain small number are. Absolutely.
Yeah, Anne Briggs too, I absolutely love. He's still going, Anne Briggs.
But see, that's the weird thing about Judy Sill. People say, well, did people not know about her back in the day? Yes, people did, actually. Everybody knew Jesus was a crossmaker. It just wasn't the market wasn't big enough.
No, it just didn't take off.
It didn't take off for the same reason Nick Drake didn't take off. And loads and loads
of people. Vashti Bunyan, I like, in doses. It's quite rich stuff, but she's fantastic, I think. And again, completely kind of disappeared and then made that comeback, which I went to see actually at the Barbican, and she's wonderful. So
but I suppose you could take the view that there's actually more appetite for that stuff made 50 years ago now than there was then. Yeah. Because the audience is just way bigger. And some of them are more attuned to that kind of thing, It's just different,
It fits. It really fits.
Yeah. After all this time. So, High Moon Records, good idea. Hope it's not the last.
This is Word in Your Ear, from Aardvark to ZZ Top and back again.
Dave, I want to fly the flag very briefly for I'm Not in Love. It's 50 years ago this week.
Oh, is it really? Wow.
I'm Not in Love by 10cc was number one, which I really remember at the time, 1975. And I think it's still a fantastically underrated record. You got to remember what strange charts they were at the time. The number ones were Oh Boy by Mud, Stand By Your Man by Tammy Wynette, Whispering Grass.
Oh, by Don Estelle and Windsor Davis.
Lovely boy.
Johnny
Nash's Tears on My Pillows. That's a Sing Lofty. That's it.
Fine pair of shoulders. Show 'em off. Yeah, go on. Carry on.
Am I hurting you, boy? I'm standing on the back of your hair. Get it cut.
Oh, sorry. It makes me laugh.
And then there was the Basic Rollers and Rod Stewart, David Essex, Art Garfunkel and Billy Connolly. Those were the kind of things that were number one. So 10cc's number one, I still think is an amazing, what different times they were. Firstly, it's a 6-minute song. That's astonishing, isn't it, for a number one record? And the title, I'm Not in Love, is just a really clever twist on what song titles about love normally were. There's a break. Do you remember the break that happens very early on with the synthesizer, which completely loses the beat? It's not the middle eight. The middle eight comes later. Ooh, don't wait a long time for me. That's the middle eight. But there's this weird little psychedelic bridge at the beginning. And then there's the girl's voice coming in, Big Boys Don't Cry and all that. And I think it's amazing. It's one of those things where they'd spent, this is Eric Stewart and Graham Gouldman spent 3 days writing this song, and they did a version of it with a kind of bossa nova rhythm, played it to the others, and the others absolutely hated it. And then they re-recorded it with more conventional instruments with the others involved, and they still said it was crap. And I think it's Kevin Godley said, can I suggest it's not working, just drop it. So they dropped it, and not only did they drop it, they erased the song. It's extraordinary. And then a few days later at Strawberry Studios, they noticed that various people who worked there were still humming the melody. to I'm Not in Love, and they went back and re-recorded a different version with the Wall of Sound vocals, and then the studio secretary put her head round the door, apparently, and said to Eric, I'm sorry to bother you, but somebody on the phone for you. And he said, that's the voice we need, and that's the voice with the big boys don't cry, where she can't quite pronounce her R's. It's an amazingly affecting thing. And on the strength of that song, which was number one, they were offered a 5-year deal for 5 albums by Phonogram, I think, and it completely changed the fortunes of the group. I think it's an extraordinary record. Don't you think? What different times that you would have allowed a record that long to be on. I mean, the outro alone is 2 minutes long, which DJs always used to fade, actually, or talk over, whatever. But it was still an amazing bit of radio. And I remember that the pace of life changed completely when that came on the radio in 1975. It was fantastic. Everything slowed down.
It shows you once again how often groups are the worst judge of the appeal of their material.
Yeah.
What were we talking about the other day? Was it Every Breath You Take? Then none of the police thought it was any good. Golden Brown, John James Bennett didn't think it was any good. And it could be that, within the dynamics of groups, if two parties, like you say, Graham Goldman and Eric Stewart, come along with it and they like it, the other two are more likely to be negative rather than supportive. They won't go, oh, okay, if you think it's a good idea, all right, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. We'll go work on it. See they'll just go, no, shit.
But don't you remember that from working in magazines? That if you entered a group, your gang, and you were too enthusiastic about an idea, it would give everyone an opportunity to resent it, to resist it.
It's the worst.
I've got this really, really brilliant idea. What you should say is, this is probably rubbish. I'm not sure if I'm feeling it myself. I'll try it out on you, and if it gets a ripple of applause, we might try and pursue it. But you can't go in there and saying, this is a work of genius. What do you think?
I've been trying to find, I'm sure I remember Capital Radio, I think it was Capital Radio, doing a listeners poll of the great love songs, and I'm sure I'm Not in Love came number one.
I think it probably did.
It's like, we always say, when a man loves a woman gets played at weddings, even though it's about infidelity, It's a very British thing, isn't it, that whole record, the whole idea of I'm not in love. It's a very.
I'm not enough, but I am.
It's a very British thing, It's a very kind of. It's about British inhibition, isn't it? Really, as much as
it is totally.
Yeah. So 50 years.
You could have worked harder on the lyric. I always thought. I hang your picture on the wall. It hides a nasty stain that's lying there.
But you see, but don't you think
better.
That's the kind of thing that people put in? That's, again, a group dynamic thing, isn't it? Is to put in a self-sabotaging joke in order to make it clear that you're not serious about the thing.
Yes.
Is to provide that kind of comforting distance between you and the subject. I suppose this is what happens when you write songs in groups, rather than have somebody come along and do it themselves. You're always... what was Paul McCartney most aware of when he wrote songs? What John Lennon thought about them.
Yeah.
He thought about that more than he thought about anything else at all. And I'm sure it's the same in absolutely every group. That's the first hurdle that they have to get over. So that's 50 years ago, and that's
50 years ago this week.
On the original soundtrack. The original soundtrack, which starts with... Do you know what it starts with? Have you ever listened to that? Have you listened to that in the last 50 years?
I happen to have a copy here.
Oh, go on. Well, tell the listeners.
This morning.
Tell the listeners.
Out this morning. It starts with One Night in Paris.
One Night in Paris.
Which is great.
And who designed the cover, Mark Allen? Here's your second question for 10.
Well, I'm assuming it was Hypnosis, because they did most of their other ones.
Okay, but who did the illustration? Who did the very beautiful illustration of, I haven't got it in front of me, but it's a...
I've got it, it's a pencil
booth.
Drawing of an old movie camera with a little video screen.
I think it's Humphrey Ocean, isn't it? I think Humphrey
Was
Ocean.
it Humphrey Ocean? My God, does he get credit? Yes,
I think he does. I think he does. Yeah, it's a very beautiful piece
Pencil
of work.
drawings by Humphrey Ocean. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Humphrey Ocean, who at the time was probably a member of
Kilburn and the Heroes. Probably was.
Yeah.
What else is on that album when you got it? While you got it there,
what else is on it? Is I'm Not in Love, Blackmail, the second sitting for the Last Supper.
Oh yes,
Brand New Day, Flying Junk, Life is a Minestrone, covered with Parmesan cheese.
Yes.
And The Film of My Love. What a good record that is.
I don't like as much as the one before, Sheet Music. I think that was the one before. Sheet Music was the one I loved, with the Dean and I on it and so forth. But anyway, so there you go. 50 years ago this week.
This is Word in Your Ear. What are you planning to do with all these records?
So we ought to mention the various things we've done. We interviewed Carol Decker from To Power, who was fantastic. We interviewed Ted Kessler and Hamish McBain, who'd written a book about Oasis, who were very, very entertaining. Elkie Brooks, good value day, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Rick Wakeman, I don't think that's out yet. We've done Rick Wakeman, who was tremendous. And we have also talked to a birthday guest. And it should be italicized that if you are one of our top tier supporters, then part of the package is you get to join the podcast and chuck a conversational log on the fire. And that was delightfully what happened this week to Blaine Allen.
And now it's time for Word in Your Ear's Birthday Guest of the Week.
So the birthday boy this week is our old friend Blaine Allen.
Errol Flynn.
Yeah, Errol Flynn. Yeah, Blaine, how you doing? When was the birthday?
It was the 15th, last Sunday.
Right. Okay. So you're recovered. Now you've got a stack waddy to propose to us.
A suitably provincial stack waddy.
Oh, right. Okay.
Let's do it. Let's try. Come on.
So let's call this quaff or quartet, tipple or trio, Canadian band or Canadian beer.
Oh, right.
Good.
Oh, very good.
Oh, okay.
All right. So several choices. It's either a Canadian band from any era or
is a
pretentious, as Alex might say, pretentious craft beer. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Go on, try us.
First one is Dragon's Breath.
Oh,
that's a beer.
Do you know that for a fact, Mark?
I don't know. It seems very familiar to me. I think it's a beer. Is it?
Are we going to take them there? We're going to take them at the end, are we?
No.
All right, go on.
One after another. David?
I'm going to say it's a prog group.
All right. Well, it is a beer. It is a cask ale that is brewed and sold about 5 blocks from where I sleep each night.
Very nice.
And usually prog band. And usually, well, actually, I found that it seems to be a name of choice for Kaylee bands as well.
Okay. Next.
Second one. Now, is this a band waiting for a cease and desist from the estate of Tennessee Williams, or a microbrew waiting for a cease and desist from a Belgian brewing powerhouse? Hey Stella.
Hey Stella. Oh God, Hey Stella. What's that? Counting a Hot Tin Roof? Is it?
Streetcar Named Desire. Streetcar Named Desire.
Okay, running out. Okay, you're right.
The fact you put in so much about the Belgian microbrewery makes me think that that's a red herring, and that it's also a band. But I may be completely wrong.
I think it's a band.
You're both right.
Yeah, it's a band.
Toronto country band of the 1990s.
It's a good name. It's a good name, actually. That's a good name. Hey Stella.
Okay, let's go French now. Beau Dommage.
Oh, right.
An idiomatic term meaning why not, or okay.
Oh, God. Okay. That's a band. I'm saying a band.
I'm feeling it's a beer, but go on.
It is a rock band from Montreal in the 1970s, and renowned enough that Canada Post put it on a stamp.
Well,
Right,
very good.
No
Very
higher
good.
accolade.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Go on.
Janky,
Spelled?
Janky, a contemporary term meaning of poor or unreliable quality.
Well, that can't be a beer, surely. That's got to be a band.
It wouldn't be if it was unreliable. It's got to be a band, and I'm saying it's a slightly folky band, actually. I think it's a bit of it's for your folk hop.
To some, janky is an expression for extremely poor or unreliable quality, but it's also an aromatic, well-balanced, medium-bodied IPA with floral and citrus notes.
Notes. They've always got floral notes, haven't they?
I know.
Now,
I love that. I love that. When people started just sipping wine and going, I'm getting gooseberries, I'm getting choir loft, I'm getting cricket bat. You just
now there is a janky band in Brisbane, Australia, and an Austin, Texas singer-songwriter named Scott Janky Lindsay. But here in this region, it's a beer.
It's a beer. Okay. Next.
Proper English.
Go on. Spell that.
Proper English.
P-R-O-P-R.
It can't possibly be a band. It couldn't be. That's an insane name.
This is Canada. Remember.
So is somebody selling beer describing it as proper English?
That's possible because English beer has got some kind of character. But if proper English band, you think, well, what would it be? I don't know.
I'm going to say beer.
It's going to say
beer.
Mark, you're saying beer as well, Dave?
Yeah.
Or Mark, yeah. Yep. 150-year-old best bitter recipe uses ingredients brought to the region by the United Empire Loyalists in the 1700s that are still grown locally. So,
Oh, God. Right. Very good.
next
Is that
one.
it?
No,
go on.
couple more.
Go on.
Often back.
Offenbach.
That's a
Right. Well,
And-
it's a composer, isn't it? It's a classical operatic composer. Offenbach. Oh God, it could be a beer. It could be a beer. I'm going to say a beer.
Yeah.
Formative Montreal blues band of the 1970s.
Okay.
Should have been put on a stamp.
Yeah.
Good name.
All right.
It's got that meter to it, like Steppenwolf. Just
Yes.
sounds
Yep.
good.
I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
it might have been drawn in by the idea of a Bach beer too, but
Yeah.
two more.
Yeah.
Two
Go
more.
on.
2 Left Feet.
2 Left Feet. It's got to be a band.
There's
gotta be a
no
band.
way that could be a beer. It doesn't make any
Bridget
sense.
Thompson wrote a song called 2 Left Feet.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't
He
he?
did.
I think he did.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
That's why I
We're
picked it.
saying a band.
Yeah, you're wrong.
No, it's a beer. Is it?
Parsons Brewing's take on a classic, unique style of beer as old as man, Belgian Lambic.
Well, go for it.
I've learned-
One more.
One more. Go on.
Prairie Oyster.
Prairie Oyster. Well, that's a band, isn't it?
I would have thought it was a band. It's a great name for a band. Loungecore. I can see them now. Definitely. Playing a bit of Steely Dan, actually, as well. Go on.
Well, you're so wrong about that, but it's a trick. It's a trick question because it is a band, a Toronto neo country band, very popular in its time, and also a beer made occasionally, I understand, in Alberta. Now, you may know what Prairie Oyster refers to.
Well, I don't. Go on.
It's a kind of...
some kind of drink, isn't
it's
it?
a
Some
drink.
kind of wrist.
On the one hand, it is a mixture of egg or egg yolk, Worcestershire sauce, tomato.
Liza Minnelli has one in Cabaret.
Right.
Yeah.
And
She has it in a tooth mug. She goes, peppermint Prairie Oyster.
and it's used as a cure for hangovers.
Yes.
And it's referred to apparently not by that name, but in a Jeeves story. But it's
Yes.
also a term used for an animal's testicles. And this beer made to support prostate cancer research in Calgary is made with apparently bull's balls. And as someone said,
Troubles all round.
the beers are not made to be tasty. Instead, they're a reminder that cancer is actually quite distasteful. That being said, these beers are actually quite tasty.
Well, good Lord. Well, it's medicinal. One on the hour every hour till symptoms subside.
100 Canadian dollars by the pint, too. So,
well, I think you win there, didn't you?
I think you did. I think you acquitted yourself.
Well, I don't know. You also are drawing our attention to this young woman on Instagram whose father passed away, leaving 10,000 albums. Is that right? Yeah,
this sort of follows up from our chat a couple of years ago where I asked you about
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, as if you'd remember.
Conversation's still going on.
As I was saying.
Yeah. Picked up with the same sentence.
Where we talked a bit about estate planning and what to do with large record collections.
I remember that. We're talking about
and this fellow who must have been quite young.
Yeah.
Well, in his 60s, maybe early 60s, left 10,000 albums to his daughter, who's in her 20s, and she has has been running an Instagram page in which she listens to and talks for a minute or so about albums one at a time, and she's aiming to go, as you would expect, through all of them. And it's really, I don't know if you've had a chance.
I had to look at it. I had to look at it, and it made me think that it's kind of like leaving a business to your children, isn't it? You might have left them a sweet shop or a dry cleaner or something like that. Well, you could leave them a load of records. You say, actually, if you work at this, you can build up a bit of an Instagram presence, because a load of 10,000 records, you can't just buy them, can you?
No.
The thing about 10,000 records is they've got an old history to them, haven't they? She won't know the history. I was watching one bit of it today, and she was, I don't know, it was a Phil Collins album from the 80s or something. Yeah. And then the next thing I saw, she was picking up an Iron Butterfly album from 1969.
Yeah.
And you thought, this is real, because nobody would pick an Iron Butterfly record for any other reason than it being real,
And what's interesting is that she doesn't give you any kind of information about the group, because she's approaching all of them having not heard them before.
Yeah.
Really.
And I thought that's really interesting, actually. When she listens to Black Sabbath, she just goes, well, this sound is very heavy and very sludgy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
And I found a little thing where she says what her favourite records have been so far, listening to her father's collection. These are out of the 10,000 albums, these are the 4 she chooses. Mass in F minor by the Electric Prunes, Tadpoles by the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, Mustard by Roy Wood, and The Cars by The Cars. Isn't that interesting?
Mustard by Roy Wood.
I think one of the wonderful things about it is that she's so young, and then she's accumulating this history, and she's so open to just about anything. Now, I haven't encountered, and actually, I've watched every one of her.
Oh my God! You really?
How many has she done then? Out of the 10,000?
It's about 250 now.
All right.
And when I first found out about it, I started watching them, maybe 2 a day, just to catch up, and it took a few months. But it was just an enormous pleasure, because she's so she's insightful, partly because of her lack of background, her lack of investment, apart from her investment with her dad, which is also, she will go through one and say, I remember listening to this, listening to my dad, or listening to this with my dad, or he would play that. And then you get things like the Phil Collins one, where she says, Phil Collins is so familiar that all the while I was listening to this, I thought I was watching Tarzan, and you just get a wonderful picture of her life with this new music to her.
It's also interesting that he talks about Tarzan and Phil Collins. Well, that's 40 years ago, that record. She wasn't born with that record.
No.
And it's like, we all think we remember things.
yet, of course, Phil Collins, existed, and his work in movies or in shows, was there for her to experience as a kid.
Yeah. I suppose so.
But it's also, and it's also interesting because there's a performative quality to this, because she seems to have an endless wardrobe, and she dresses for
That's right.
Half the battle, I think.
Yeah, there's hair and makeup involved.
Yes,
absolutely.
Clearly.
It's an influencer by another route,
Yeah.
Really original subject. No, it's
fascinating. And she has 400,000 followers too.
Well, there you go. You go.
It's working.
Very good.
We want to say that it's called Sound Waves Off Wax.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to see it on Instagram, that's what you should go for.
You'll find it.
That's
as recommended by our birthday boy, Blaine Allen. I can't say it.
I can't either.
Such a difficult name.
Blaine Allen Flynn.
And nice to talk to you, Blaine. And
lovely to speak with both of you.
Happy birthday of a few days ago.
See you next year.
Thank you so much.
This conversation will continue.
Yes. Cheers.
That's great. And we'll see you at the quiz.
Yes, indeed.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.